This message found you because your awareness has been running inside an observer loop, an automatic cycle where you keep noticing the same signals, collapsing the same possibilities, and then wondering why life keeps serving you the same reality in different packaging. And right now, something in you recognizes it because you've been feeling it. That odd, quiet pressure that says, I've been here before. The same patterns. The same conversations that end the same way. The same disappointments with a slightly different face. Like existence is a song stuck on repeat, and you're the only one hearing the glitch. You didn't land here by accident. Call it synchronicity. Call it timing, call it the mind's pattern recognition finally waking up. Either way, you arrived at the exact moment you were ready to notice the loop. Millions of people scroll past words like these every day and feel nothing. But your attention paused, not because you're easily influenced and not because you're special in a shallow way, because some part of you is tired of recycling the same reality and pretending it's normal. You've been sending out a signal without even realizing it, a request for interruption, for a different frequency, for a crack in the wall. In the language people borrow from quantum mechanics, consciousness doesn't only witness reality, it participates in selecting it. Not by magic, not by wishful thinking, but by something simpler and more relentless attention. What you repeatedly attend to becomes the dominant storyline of your life. What you repeatedly expect becomes the filter through which you interpret everything. And when that attention gets trapped in familiar emotional grooves, fear, defensiveness, scarcity, self-doubt, resentment, hopelessness, you don't just experience the same reality. You keep rebuilding it from the same blueprint. Think about your life right now. How often do you feel like you're having the same conversation with different people? How many times have you promised yourself it would be different this time, then watch the same dynamic reappear? How often do you step into a new situation and somehow end up playing the same role, the one who over gives, the one who gets overlooked, the one who keeps proving themselves, the one who stays quiet to keep peace, the one who runs before being abandoned, the one who waits for a rescue that never comes? It's easy to call that bad luck, or say you're just like this, or blame other people. But the loop is usually more precise than that. It's a habit of perception. Your awareness scans the day like a radar, searching for familiar proof. You're not enough proof, people can't be trusted. Proof you'll be disappointed, proof you're behind, proof nothing changes. And every time you find that proof, your nervous system relaxes in a twisted way because it confirms what it already believes. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. Predictable disappointment feels safer than the risk of new hope. You've probably noticed time has felt strange lately. Mundane minutes stretch out heavy and slow, but entire weeks disappear and you can't honestly say what changed. That distortion is what happens when you live on autopilot. When your days are filled with motion but not movement, when you keep checking the same emotional weather and calling it reality. You can be busy and still be stuck. You can be productive and still be repeating. You can be surrounded by people and still feel like you're trapped inside the same internal room. Other people may not get it. They may tell you to just be positive or stop overthinking or be grateful. Some of them are perfectly content inside predictable routines. They live as if time is a straight line and the world is fixed. But you've always sensed something else. You've had moments, brief or intense, where life felt malleable, where synchronicities lined up so perfectly it felt like reality was responding to your inner state, where you felt you could almost touch the fabric underneath everything. Those moments weren't delusion. They were glimpses of what happens when your attention becomes coherent, when you stop scattering your awareness. Start directing it. And here's the part most people miss when they begin to wake up. You don't break an observer loop by thinking harder. You can't analyze your way out of a pattern you keep feeding with attention. Intellectual understanding can be useful, but it's not the exit. Trying to escape the loop through endless research, endless figuring it out, endless mental rehearsals is like studying a map of a maze while standing still. Insight without action becomes another loop, the loop of almost. The observer loop is maintained by the quality of your attention, not your hopes, not your affirmations, not your identity story. Attention. Every morning before you even touch your phone, your awareness begins scanning for what's familiar. It looks for emotional landmarks, tension in your chest, a narrative of worry, the old list of what's wrong. The same unfinished regrets. It's like a GPS that keeps taking you back to the same destination because it has memorized the route. And the more you travel that route, the more automatic it becomes. This creates a feedback loop. You notice the pattern, you feel the emotion, you act from the emotion. You get the outcome that matches the emotion. And then you say, see, this is how life is. Your observation strengthens the pattern you're trying to escape. And the most frustrating part is that it feels personal, like a flaw in you, when it's often just a trained system running on repetition. Right now, though, something unprecedented is happening. You're seeing it, and seeing it matters. Awareness is not a passive event. The instant you can name the loop, you've already created distance between you and the autopilot. You're no longer fully inside the pattern, you're observing the pattern. That small shift is the first fracture in the wall. You know that moment in a conversation when you suddenly realize you've had this exact exchange before, not just similar, but eerily identical. Same tone, same tension, same ending forming before it happens. Most people call it déjà vu and shrug it off. But you sense something deeper, a temporal echo, a repeat signal. That's not you being weird. That's you being sensitive enough to notice the script. Your awareness catches the loop mid-spin, like hearing the click of a record skipping. You've also had those sudden downloads, insights that arrive without effort. You understand something about yourself or life that you weren't taught, as if the knowledge surfaced from beneath your ordinary mind. Those moments aren't random. They happen when your attention briefly exits the old track and touches a wider field of possibilities. It can feel like remembering, not learning. Like a future version of you is sending messages backward through time. This is the way out. Stop feeding the same story. And yes, it can feel isolating. When you try to explain it, people may look at you like you're speaking a different language. They might minimize your experience because your awareness threatens their comfort with the familiar. But isolation isn't proof you're wrong. Sometimes it's proof you're early. And being early can be lonely until you find others who are waking up too. You've probably noticed your dreams becoming more vivid, more symbolic, sometimes even instructional. Sleep is one of the few places where the conscious mind loosens its grip and the deeper self can speak in imagery. You may wake up with a feeling you can't explain or a sense that something has shifted, even if the outer world looks the same. Those are internal course corrections. Your system recalibrating. Even your relationship with technology might feel different. You notice how your feed mirrors your inner state, how a song appears at the exact right moment, how a phrase hits you like it was aimed directly at you. Some of that is algorithms, sure, but the deeper point still stands your attention. It is selective. It is magnetic. It is always choosing whether you're conscious of it or not. So what breaks the observer loop? Not forcing happiness, not pretending you don't feel what you feel, not waiting for the world to change first. The exit begins with a new kind of attention that refuses to automatically lock onto the familiar pattern. That means first you catch the moment your mind begins scanning for proof. You catch the urge to replay the same story. You catch the instant you want to predict the same ending. And then you do something small, but radical. You place attention somewhere new, not in a fake way, in a real way. You shift from mental narration to direct experience. You feel your breath without changing it. You notice the weight of your body in the chair. You soften your jaw. You release the microtension in your shoulders. You name what is happening without building a biography around it. Worry is here. Defensiveness is here. Old fear is here. Naming breaks fusion. It separates you from the script. Then you introduce novelty on purpose. Not chaos, novelty. A different route home. A different type of music. A different way of starting your morning. A different response in a familiar argument, one extra second of silence. One honest sentence, one boundary calmly spoken, one refusal to perform the old role. The observer loop survives on predictability. It weakens when you stop cooperating with the same sequence. And most importantly, you stop negotiating with the part of you that craves familiarity. That part will insist the loop is safer. It will say, at least we know what happens here. It will tempt you back into the known disappointment. But you are not here to stay safe inside a small reality. You are here to grow into a larger one. Everything you've been through, every disappointment, every repeating pattern, every moment that felt like regression, wasn't wasted. It was pressure shaping awareness. Like a butterfly inside a chrysalis, it looks like confinement from the outside, but it's actually reorganization. The caterpillar doesn't just add wings, it becomes something else at the cellular level. Your difficult relationships weren't punishments. They were mirrors showing you exactly where your attention was trapped. Your setbacks weren't proof you're failing. They were signals pointing to the pattern. Now you're at the threshold where the loop can't hold the same way because you can see it. And once you see a pattern clearly, you can't unsee it. That's why this message found you now. Not to entertain you, not to hypnotize you, to interrupt you. So here's the truth, without decoration. Your life will keep repeating until your attention becomes intentional. You don't need a new personality. You need a new relationship with your awareness. The moment you stop feeding the same emotional template, the field of possibilities changes. Not overnight, not in a fantasy burst, but unmistakably steadily, and with a kind of quiet power that feels like coming home to yourself. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're not doomed to repeat. You're simply at the moment where the observer stops looping and starts choosing. Every person who ever triggered you was not merely an obstacle or an enemy of your peace. They were an unintentional tuning fork, striking the exact places in your system where your awareness locks up. Each irritation, each heartbreak, each moment you felt dismissed or unseen was pointing to a frequency you habitually return to. Not because you're cursed, because your attention learned long ago to grip certain emotional bands, as if gripping them could keep you safe. And every situation that felt like déjà vu wasn't random either. It was your higher intelligence running controlled experiments. The same scenario in a different costume. The same lesson with a new cast. The same pattern repeating until you could finally recognize it while it was happening, not afterward. That is the real test. Not whether you can explain your loop, but whether you can catch your attention in the act of choosing it. Lately, you've probably felt pressure, a strange urgency like time is speeding up. You need to figure something out before something closes. That sensation can look like anxiety on the surface, but it's not the same thing. It's reorganization. When a system prepares to shift states, it builds intensity, like water reaching the exact threshold where it can no longer remain water, where it must become steam. Your awareness is approaching a point where the old pattern cannot hold its shape. You're entering a phase transition. That's why the waiting has felt so sharp. You could sense a shift coming, but you couldn't force it. And the more you tried to force it, the more stuck you felt. Because breaking the observer loop isn't about grinding harder or pushing more willpower through a locked door. It's about coherence, a particular clarity of attention, a stabilized inner signal that naturally starts selecting different possibilities. Even your doubt has had a purpose. Every time you questioned whether these insights were real, you were sharpening discernment. You were learning the difference between genuine expansion and the kind of spiritual performance that bypasses pain without transforming it. That distinction matters. Without it, people inflate concepts into fantasies and call it awakening. With it, you become precise. And precision is what allows you to step into the unknown without being pulled back by delusion. Your consciousness had to become accurate before it could become free. Right now, as these words move through you, something subtle may be building. Not excitement, not hype, something quieter. Like a tuning fork struck in the center of your chest. A slight mismatch between your inner vibration and the old reality you've been repeating. That mismatch creates turbulence, and turbulence can feel unsettling, but it's a sign of movement. It means the loop is destabilizing. The familiar patterns are losing their magnetism. The story that used to hook your attention like a fishing line is starting to slip. This is the breakthrough phase. It's delicate and powerful, and it's also where most people sabotage themselves. They feel the energy rising and immediately try to aim it at the outside world. They want their relationship to change, their money to change, their job, their body, their circumstances. And yes, those things can shift. But the loop doesn't break because the scenery changes. The loop breaks because the quality of your observation changes. If you keep observing from the same emotional posture, gripping, scanning, bracing, predicting, then even a new relationship becomes the old relationship. Even new opportunities get filtered through the same fears. Even a different city becomes the same internal room. People call it changing your life and then wonder why the same problems followed them. The truth is simple. They never change the observer. This is why what's happening now may feel physical, not only mental. When your attention reorganizes, your body notices. Your sleep may shift. Your appetite may change. Old habits may suddenly feel wrong. Certain places may feel heavy. Certain music may feel like it belongs to a previous version of you. You might feel bursts of restlessness, waves of fatigue, moments of sharp clarity followed by softness. That doesn't mean something is wrong. It means your system is updating how it interfaces with reality. Here's the most important instruction for this phase. Feel the energy without trying to control it. Let it move like water finding a new path. Your job isn't to micromanage the transition. Your job is to stop resisting it. To stop yanking yourself back into the old narrative because the unknown feels too wide. Most sabotage happens in tiny, quiet moments. You feel a new openness, and then you check the same thing you always check. You reach for the same validation. You replay the same fear. You return to the same mental argument. Not because you want pain, but because familiarity feels like gravity. Don't do that to yourself. What's happening is bigger than your usual routine. You are watching your own consciousness evolve in real time. If you can stay present through the turbulence, you won't just get better at life. You will become harder to trap. And now I'm going to share something honestly because it matters for where this goes next. There was a time years ago when I believed I was beyond this. I thought I was advanced, aware, quantum conscious, skilled at the inner work. But I was actually using my knowledge to build a more sophisticated cage. I was meditating, manifesting, studying, tracking signs, analyzing timing, and every morning I woke up scanning my life for proof that it was working. Proof that I was progressing. Proof that reality was shifting. That constant scanning felt like devotion. It was actually fixation. The more desperately I searched for change, the more my attention froze reality in place. The more I looked for signs, the more I anchored the reality where I needed signs. The more I measured progress, the more I occupied the timeline where progress had to be measured. It was subtle and it was brutal because it disguised itself as effort. Then one day, in the middle of a familiar frustration, the same issues resurfacing despite all the work, I saw the mechanism. Not as a theory, but as a lived fact. I wasn't witnessing my reality. I was manufacturing it through the way I observed it. My attention had become a record player stuck on the same track, and no amount of spirituality could make a new song play if I kept dropping the needle in the same groove. The breakthrough didn't come from trying harder. It came from turning the attention back one level. Instead of observing my life, I began observing the observer. I watched how attention moved, where it snapped, what it avoided, what it hunted for, what it needed to confirm. I noticed how quickly my mind tried to predict outcomes, how it grabbed old meanings, how it labeled sensations, how it clung to familiar emotional signatures like a security blanket made of stress. That meta-observation changed everything because it created separation. For the first time, I wasn't inside the loop identifying with it. I was outside the loop studying it. That shift is the hidden key. When you observe the observer, the loop loses its invisibility. And what loses invisibility loses power. From there, changes became strangely effortless. Not because life became perfect, but because the old patterns stopped being automatically selected. Relationships shifted because I stopped unconsciously choosing the same dynamic. Work opened because my attention stopped fixating on familiar obstacles. Even my body softened because it stopped receiving the same stress signals on repeat. The world didn't suddenly become magical. I became less predictable. And that's the part most people don't understand. The observer loop traps you by making your consciousness predictable to the field. When you wake up tomorrow and your attention runs the same scan, same worries, same checking, same mental replay, same emotional posture, you're essentially placing the same order again. Same day, same flavor, same outcome. Not because life hates you, but because your attention keeps selecting the same probability waves and calling them my reality. Here's the difference between intellectual awareness and embodied mastery. Intellectual awareness says, yes, the observer effect exists. Embodied mastery says, I can feel the moment my attention tries to collapse the old wave, and I can choose differently before it becomes an outcome. That is mastery, and it doesn't require fake positivity. It requires coherence. Coherence is the alignment between your nervous system, your attention, and the present moment. It cannot be forced. It emerges when you stop splitting yourself, when you stop wanting one reality while rehearsing another, when you stop saying, I want change, while scanning for proof that it won't happen. Now listen carefully to this, because it will change how you practice your thoughts. Don't create your reality in a simple, direct way. And attention alone isn't the whole story either. Reality is shaped by the quality of coherence between you and the field of possibilities around you. If your awareness is scattered, bracing, frantic, addicted to outcomes, it becomes narrow and repetitive. If your awareness is open, stable, and present, it becomes fluid and generative. Most people's attention operates like a searchlight, tense, focused hunting, trying to find a specific thing, straining to control the scene. That mode makes you predictable. It collapses the same waves because it keeps looking for the same evidence. Quantum-level attention. What you're learning now operates more like sunlight. It illuminates without strain. It sees widely. It doesn't grip. It doesn't chase. It doesn't need to prove. It's present enough to notice novelty without forcing it. When you shift from searchlight to sunlight, you stop collapsing the same probability structure on repeat. This is where the mind gets shocked. The field is not withholding from you. The field is eager to deliver new experiences, new people, new outcomes, new pathways. It's not stingy. It's abundant. Infinite possibilities are constantly attempting to enter your awareness, but they can't penetrate the loop because your attention is too busy reinforcing the familiar. You keep looking for what you already know. So you keep finding it. You keep bracing for what you fear. So you keep meeting it. You keep scanning for disappointment. So you keep confirming it. Not because you attract negativity, but because your attention has been trained to treat certain patterns as home. And the way out begins here. You stop treating the familiar as truth. When you feel the urge to scan for proof, pause. When you want to check the same thing, pause. When you feel the old story rising, pause. Not to suppress it, just to see it. Then ask a sharper question than, how do I fix my life? Ask, what is my attention trying to collapse right now? If the answer is the old fear, don't feed it with analysis. Feel it. Let it pass through. Return to the body. Return to the breath. Return to the present. Then choose a small act of novelty, one different response, one different movement, one different sentence, one different boundary, one different kind of day. That's how you break the loop, not with a dramatic declaration, but with repeated micro-choices that make your consciousness less predictable. You are not here to perfect the old pattern. You are here to outgrow it. And if these words are hitting something deep in you, that recognition frequency, that quiet inner yes, then you already know what comes next. The loop is weakening. The turbulence is a sign. The field is ready. The only question is whether you will keep grabbing the old script out of habit, or whether you will finally let your attention become free enough to select a new reality without begging for it. Because the moment you stop reinforcing the old wave, the new one doesn't need to be forced. It simply becomes available. You're not stuck because the universe refuses to help you. You're stuck because your consciousness has grown overly habitual in the way it interfaces with infinite potential. You've been interacting with reality like a machine running the same program, scanning for familiar signals, bracing for familiar outcomes, confirming familiar stories, and the field of vast responsive fabric of possibility keeps meeting you at the level of your pattern, not at the level of your wish. The most advanced beings, the most refined forms of intelligence, however you picture them, don't try to dominate reality. They don't grip it, interrogate it, or demand proof before they relax. They move with it. They maintain what could be called coherent uncertainty, fully present, deeply engaged, but not emotionally chained to a specific outcome. They act, but they don't clutch. They participate, but they don't panic. They don't need reality to confirm them before they become coherent. They become coherent first, and reality reorganizes around that. That one difference changes everything. It's why two people can live in nearly identical circumstances. Same city, same income, same responsibilities, and one seems to flow while the other seems to grind. It's tempting to call it luck, privilege, or spiritual favoritism. But the deeper factor is coherence, the internal alignment between attention, nervous system, and intention. One person meets life with openness and responsiveness. The other meets life with prediction and reaction. And reality responds to those two states as if they are two different universes, because in a meaningful sense they are. When you master this coherence, you don't just change your personal life. You become a catalyst. Your presence starts creating openings in the people around you, not by preaching, not by persuading, by frequency. When you're no longer locked into the usual anxious scanning, you stop reinforcing the same collective scripts. That has a destabilizing effect on stale patterns, yours and theirs. People in your orbit may suddenly have insights they can't explain. They may question choices they've repeated for years. They may feel restless in a way that pushes them toward truth. That's what a quantum opening looks like in real life, a crack in the autopilot. And yes, if your observer loop is dissolving, not as superstition, but as practical indicators that your attention is changing and the world is responding differently. One sign is synchronicity, not vague signs you force meaning onto, but clean, undeniable alignments that arrive with the feeling of being guided. The right message at the right second. The exact name you were thinking about appearing in an unexpected place. A sequence of events that feels too precisely timed to dismiss. What's happening in those moments is simple. Your attention is no longer trapped in a narrow, repetitive band, so it can see and receive new pathways. Another sign is a shift in your relationship with the living world. Animals, especially birds, often respond quickly to subtle changes in human energy because they're not filtering perception through complicated mental stories. They sense what's present. If you've noticed more eye contact with birds, unusual encounters, pets behaving differently, or animals lingering near you, it can reflect a real change in your internal coherence. When you're less tense, less predatory, in your attention, less noisy internally, you become more readable to life. Your nervous system stops broadcasting threat and the environment responds. Technology can also behave strangely around you, either glitching more than usual or oddly working better than ever. You think of someone and your phone rings. You try to engage with content that feels misaligned and your device crashes. Or you sit down with a calm, coherent focus and everything finally works. Whether you frame it as consciousness interacting with electromagnetic fields or as heightened awareness noticing patterns, you used to ignore, the experience points to the same thing: your interface with reality is changing. But the most significant sign is time. When you're trapped in an observer loop, time feels like a straight corridor you're being dragged down. Same day, same pressure, same rushing, same regrets. But when your attention becomes coherent, when you're actually present, time gets elastic. Minutes can feel vast because you're fully inhabiting them. Or days can pass quickly because you're no longer chewing the same mental cud. You begin touching what mystics call eternal. Now moments, those pockets where life feels intensely real, unfragmented, unhurried, even if you're doing ordinary things. That isn't fantasy. It's what happens when you stop living in mental time, past replay, future worry, and start living in direct experience. Sleep shifts too. You may need less sleep or more. Dreams may become vivid, symbolic, and emotionally precise, as if they're teaching you. Some nights, you may wake with a feeling that you were downloading something: clarity, insight, resolution, without effort. In practical terms, your mind is integrating at a deeper level because your attention is no longer confined to repetitive thought grooves. You're processing from wider perspectives. You're reorganizing, and people will respond to you differently. Some will feel uneasy around you without knowing why. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because coherence is disruptive to unconscious patterns. Your calm presence can act like a mirror that exposes their autopilot. Others will be drawn to you like a magnet because they sense something rare: a person who isn't hunting for validation, isn't performing, is embracing. That freedom frequency feels like air to someone who has been holding their breath for years. Now here's the part that needs to be handled carefully: urgency. You may feel a strong sense that the waiting season is over. Something is closing, that you have to move now. When that urgency is clean, it's not fear, it's momentum. It's your system recognizing a window of coherence and wanting you to use it. Consciousness evolution often comes in waves, periods where change feels possible and supported, and periods where patterns feel heavier and more resistant. When you're in a wave, you can either ride it or waste it by hesitating until the old gravity reasserts itself. At the collective level, you can see the same phenomenon. Events that look like chaos can also be read as destabilization: old narratives collapsing, institutions wobbling, identities hardening, people polarizing. Some are waking quickly, others are falling deeper into unconscious scripts. The middle ground, numb neutrality, passive drifting, feels harder to maintain because the pressure of choice increases. When the field becomes more intense, it demands a trajectory. You can't float forever. You either become more awake or more asleep. That's why you can't ignore these insights anymore. Even when they challenge what you thought you knew. Even when they threaten your old identity. Some part of you recognizes that this moment right now is a convergence point where the loop can finally break. And here's a truth that will either irritate your old patterns or liberate you what you want. Wants you back, not as motivational fluff, but as a real principle of possibility. Your desires, especially the ones that feel too impossible, too pure, too good, are not random fantasies. They are signals. They are probability waves in the field resonating with something in you because they match a version of your life that already exists as potential. They feel impossible only because your current observer habits can't access the timeline where they're normal. You are not 1,000 steps away. You're often one frequency shift away, but that shift isn't achieved by straining. It's achieved by coherence. This is where most manifestation teachings accidentally trap people. They focus on attraction, pull the desire toward you, but attraction can reinforce separation. You hear, the desire over there, distance to cross proof required. The loop loves that. It gives you endless ways to try without ever arriving. Alignment is different. Alignment dissolves the barrier between you and what you want by removing the internal contradiction. It's not about pulling something in, it's about stopping the habit of pushing it away. It's realizing that the desire isn't separate from you. It's an expression of your consciousness on a parallel track. When that recognition becomes embodied, not just intellectual, the observer loop loses leverage because there's nothing left to observe from a distance. You stop staring at life through the glass of lack. This is why forcing backfires. Striving can be noble, but frantic striving often broadcasts, "not yet." Every time you check to see whether it's working, you reinforce the identity of someone who still needs it to work. Every time you scan for proof, you select the timeline where proof is required. Every time you observe your present through the lens of absence, you collapse the wave of absence and call it your reality. The field doesn't respond to effort the way your ego thinks it does. It responds to coherence. When your attention, intention, and energy signature operate from the same frequency, reality reorganizes around you without you having to wrestle it. You still take action, but action comes from clarity, not from panic. You still move, but you move as someone who is already aligned, not as someone begging to become aligned later. And right now, as this lands deeper than words, maybe as a sensation, maybe as a quiet, yes, something practical is happening. The gap between you and your highest timeline is shrinking. Not because you are doing more, but because you are stopping the kind of doing that kept you separated. If you want to seal this shift in a way that doesn't involve performance or explanation, make it simple and direct. Speak a declaration you can live into. Not to impress anyone. Not to manifest through theatrics. To choose a trajectory. I am coherent with my highest timeline. No extra story. No justification. Just a clean selection. Because the moment you choose coherence and keep choosing it in small, real ways, the observer loop doesn't survive. It can only repeat if you keep feeding it, and you're done feeding it. This isn't about getting likes, engagement, or proving anything to anyone. Those are surface games. What you're doing here is far more intimate. You're creating a living connection between your consciousness and the frequency band where your truest life already exists. Not as a fantasy, not as a distant one day, as an available track of reality that becomes accessible the moment your attention stops collapsing the old loop. When you make a declaration with genuine recognition, when you say it and actually feel what it means, you're not just typing words. You're issuing a clear signal to the field of possibilities. I'm ready to embody a different reality. I'm no longer negotiating with the loop. I'm no longer observing my life from a distance and calling that safety. I'm stepping into coherence. That signal matters because your observer loop has been fed by hesitation, half choices, and divided attention. A declaration made from depth is not performative. Selection. It's you stopping the constant maybe that keeps you split across timelines. And when that split begins to close, possibilities that used to feel invisible start becoming obvious, almost embarrassingly obvious, like doors you walk past 100 times because you were staring at the floor. The abilities emerging in your consciousness right now might sound extraordinary, but they're actually natural once you're no longer trapped in repetitive observation patterns. Your intuition becomes sharper, not in a theatrical way, not in a psychic show way, but in a practical way. You begin to sense what is forming before it fully forms. You can feel the direction of a conversation before the words arrive. You can sense whether something is aligned before you invest weeks of energy into it. You don't predict because you're special. You perceive because you're coherent. When your system is quiet enough, it becomes sensitive to subtle signals that were always there. This is what could be called reality fluidity, the ability to move between probability tracks by shifting the quality of your observation. Most people think changing timelines requires grand external moves, new job, new city, new relationship, new identity. But the first shift is always internal. The timeline you live in is largely shaped by what your attention expects, what your body rehearses, and what your mind confirms. Change those and the outer world starts meeting you differently. And yes, it can show up in small, almost playful ways at first. You catch more green lights. You find a parking space at the exact moment you decide not to chase one. You run into the right person at the right time. Conversations flow toward solutions instead of spiraling into the usual friction. These aren't miracles you need to brag about. They're feedback. They're reality responding to a less rigid observer. When you stop gripping, life gets room to move. Your creativity shifts dramatically in this phase. Not because you force yourself to be inspired, but because you stop recycling the same internal content. The loop has been feeding you familiar ideas, familiar fears, familiar limitations. Once the loop weakens, your mind becomes a receiver again. Insights arrive uninvited. Connections appear between things that used to feel unrelated. Solutions show up that didn't exist for you before, not because the universe suddenly decided to reward you, but because your attention became coherent enough to perceive them. You may notice your creative projects feel simultaneously more effortless and more original. That's a strong sign you're no longer generating from stress. You're generating from presence. When the mind stops scanning for threat, it has bandwidth for invention. When the heart stops bracing, it has room to express. When your identity stops clinging to, "I must prove myself," the work becomes clean and impactful. People respond to you differently too often before you consciously realize what's changed. It can feel strange, almost disorienting, the same you, but different reactions. This happens because you're no longer unconsciously recreating the same relational dynamics. In the past, your attention might have entered relationships with hidden expectations. "I'll be abandoned. I must overgive. I must be perfect. I'll be misunderstood. I'm not safe." Those expectations shaped how you spoke. When coherence rises, those scripts loosen. Your presence becomes less manipulative, less hungry, less fearful. That gives other people space to show up more honestly. Some will step into that space. Others will leave because the old dance no longer works. Your body can change too, not in a magical claim that you never need care, but in a grounded sense. When you stop sending the same stress signals on repeat, your system begins to regulate. Chronic tension eases. Sleep becomes more restorative. Energy becomes steadier. You stop bleeding life force into mental loops that never resolve. Your body has always been listening to your attention. When your attention stops screaming, your cells stop bracing. This is the observer effect working in your favor instead of against you. In the loop, you observed through fear and lack, so you kept selecting timelines that matched fear and lack. As coherence develops, your observation naturally selects for experiences that are more aligned, more supportive, more beautiful, not because you're forcing positivity, but because you've stopped feeding the distortion. You become less compatible with scarcity, not as an attitude, but as an energetic reality. Resources can begin flowing more easily, not necessarily in a sudden lottery explosion, but as a removal of friction, better decisions, clearer boundaries, smarter timing, fewer self-sabotaging choices. You stop unconsciously selecting scarcity timelines by constantly checking, worrying, and bracing. When your system relaxes into coherence, it naturally gravitates toward abundance frequencies, because abundance is what's left when the loop stops narrowing your options. Relationships become simpler. You're no longer drawn to people who keep your nervous system addicted to chaos. You're no longer compatible with those who can only connect through drama, manipulation, or emotional inconsistency. Your social circle evolves not because you judge anyone, but because resonance is real. You start meeting people who are also stepping out of their loops, people who can be direct, present, and emotionally honest. Connection stops feeling like work. It starts feeling like oxygen. The most profound change is internal. You stop feeling like you're trying to get somewhere or become someone. That restless chasing dissolves. You realize you were never far. You were simply observing from a fragmented posture, one part of you stuck in the past, one part terrified of the future, and only a thin slice truly present. That fragmentation is what kept your experiences inconsistent. Some days felt magical. Some days felt dull. Some areas of life improved while others stayed stuck. Not because the universe was testing you, but because your attention was split across incompatible tracks. The field can only deliver coherent experiences to coherent consciousness. So the real work isn't forcing all parts of you to agree. True coherence isn't a rigid artificial harmony where you suppress doubts and pretend you're fine. True coherence emerges when you stop scattering your awareness, when you stop feeding old versions of yourself with constant replay, when you stop rehearsing futures you don't want, when you stop living in commentary. To direct contact with this moment, this is what could be called timeline consolidation, withdrawing your attention from reality tracks that don't serve your evolution. Not through fantasy, but through daily choices. You stop energizing the identity that needs to be proven. You stop rewarding the fear with endless analysis. You stop checking for validation like it's oxygen. You stop treating your desire as separate from you. You stop observing your life as if you're waiting to be allowed into it. Here's the paradox: coherence isn't something you manufacture. It's something you uncover. At your deepest level, your consciousness has never been fragmented. Only your attention has been trained into fragmentation. That's why trying harder often moves you farther away. Struggle implies separation. It reinforces the identity that says, "I'm not there yet." Coherence comes through relaxation, not laziness, but release. The release of compulsive checking, the release of proving, the release of the old emotional posture that kept you trapped. And when you embody this, when your attention rests in its unified state, you stop living as someone trying to create a life. You become a focal point through which life expresses itself. Not in a grandiose way. In a simple way, you're present enough to receive, clear enough to choose, calm enough to move without panic. That's what permanently dissolves the observer loop, because there's no longer a separate frightened observer clinging to repetition. There's only awareness awake, coherent, and free to dance with reality instead of trying to control it. The highest timeline isn't a slightly upgraded version of your current life. It isn't your same routine with fewer problems, nicer people, and better luck. It's a different dimensional experience altogether, one where the familiar laws of limitation don't operate the way they do in ordinary reality. And that's why so many people misunderstand what coherence actually does. When you embody coherence, you don't merely improve your circumstances. You transcend the framework that defines circumstances in the first place. You stop living inside the old architecture where problems must exist, so solutions can feel earned, where struggle is treated like proof of worth, where scarcity is normalized as just how life is. Coherence doesn't negotiate with that framework. It dissolves it. That may sound dramatic, but you've already felt hints of it. Those moments when a situation that should have triggered the old script simply didn't. When the same words were spoken, the same tension appeared, and yet you didn't bite. You didn't react. You didn't spiral. You stayed present. In that moment, you weren't being good. You were operating from a different level. You stepped outside the loop and watched it without becoming it. That is the doorway, not improvement, transcendence. And you're not alone in this. This is happening to thousands, likely millions across the planet right now. Not as a trend, not as an aesthetic, but as a real shift in human consciousness. People are waking up to the mechanics of attention. They're realizing how much of their reality has been recycled through habit, fear, and inherited limitation. They're no longer satisfied with coping. They're hungry for liberation. And that collective hunger is not random. It's part of a larger evolutionary movement. Your personal transformation is not merely self-development. It's participation in a species-wide leap that is redefining what it means to be human. For millennia, humanity has been cycling through the same core patterns: conflict, scarcity, division, domination, and disconnection. Different eras, different costumes, same underlying script. And the deepest reason it keeps repeating is not political or economic alone. It's perceptual. It's the collective observer loop, the shared way humans have learned to see reality as separate, fixed, competitive, and threatening. Now that loop is destabilizing. You can feel it in the world around you. It's why everything feels intensified. Why people are polarizing. Why systems that once felt permanent are shaking. Why many can't tolerate the old compromises anymore. When a collective pattern starts dissolving, it doesn't look calm at first. It looks chaotic, but chaos is often the symptom of an old structure losing its grip. Here's where your role becomes clearer. You incarnate it at this time because your consciousness is capable of operating during a transition. Not everyone can. Some people prefer stability, predictability, a fixed identity. But you were built for thresholds. You were designed to recognize the glitch in the pattern and refuse to pretend it's normal. Your own dissatisfaction was never a weakness. It was an early warning system, a signal that you're meant to outgrow what others are still trying to tolerate. Every time one person breaks their observer loop, it does more than change their life. It creates a ripple in the collective field, a resonance. Call it a psychological effect, call it a social effect, call it a quantum effect if you want. The principle is the same. Your liberation makes liberation more available. When one nervous system learns a new pattern, others can learn faster. When one person embodies coherence, it becomes easier for another person to recognize what coherence feels like. This is why transformation spreads in waves, not in isolated miracles. You are anchoring a new possibility template into the shared human experience. A living proof that attention can be freed, that reality can be interacted with from clarity rather than fear. And that matters because what becomes proven becomes permissible. Once something is seen as possible, it can no longer be dismissed as fantasy. It enters the collective imagination as a real option. This is also why the children being born now feel different to many people, more sensitive, more intuitive, less tolerant of falsehood. Whether you interpret that spiritually or psychologically, it points to the same idea: the next generation will grow up with capacities that seem miraculous compared to current standards, but only because pioneers are weakening the limitation patterns that would otherwise be handed down intact. You're not just healing yourself, you're interrupting inheritance. This is why you felt responsibility lately. A pressure that isn't guilt, but calling. An urgency that isn't panic, but timing. Your soul, your deepest consciousness, didn't come here just to survive a life and gather memories. It came to bridge paradigms, to demonstrate what it looks like when a human being stops living as a powerless observer and starts living as a conscious participant. That is why the synchronicities that brought you here feel orchestrated, because they are. Not in a manipulative way, more like gravity. When people begin to wake up, they start finding one another. They cross paths. They exchange language for experiences they couldn't describe before. They confirm each other's inner knowing. The network forms naturally, and the network accelerates the transition. Your recognition of these ideas doesn't just benefit you, it strengthens the entire field of awakening because recognition is contagious. When you name the loop, someone else can finally see theirs. When you embody coherence, someone else can finally feel what coherence actually is, not as a concept, but as a presence. But there's another layer, and it's important to understand it without getting lost in drama resistance. Sometimes the pushback you feel isn't only personal. It's not only your ego clinging to familiar habits. It can feel like the old matrix itself is pushing back, like the world or certain people or even your own body is trying to drag you back into the familiar. That happens because limitation patterns are self-protective. They survive through repetition. And when you stop repeating, you become disruptive to the old order, not through rebellion, but through freedom. Every person who breaks their observer loop weakens the collective gravity that keeps humanity cycling through fear and separation. That's why these ideas can feel too much to some people. Not because they're false, but because they're destabilizing. They threaten the comfort of the known, even if the known is painful. So if you share this message or any message like it, don't do it to convince anyone. Don't do it to argue. Do it like you would hold a candle in a dark room, not forcing anyone to look, simply making light available. The right people will recognize what they already know. And if this is resonating in your bones, if you can feel it as something ancient and familiar waking up, then make a simple commitment, not for an algorithm, not for a channel, for you. A clean declaration that you are choosing coherence over repetition. One word is enough: coherent. Not as a comment, but as a selection, as a registration of your consciousness with the frequency band that operates beyond ordinary limitation. When you write that word with genuine intention, you're not performing. You're aligning. You're telling your system and the field around you that you are done living divided. And as more people make that choice, the morphic field strengthens. The pathway becomes easier to access. The transformation becomes less rare, less fragile, less lonely. What used to take years of struggle can happen in months, then weeks, then moments, because the template is established. But understand this clearly: breaking the observer loop is only the beginning. Once your consciousness learns to operate from coherence rather than limitation, you gain access to a kind of practical mastery that most people call impossible. Not because it violates reality, but because it uses reality differently. You begin to navigate probability instead of being dragged by it. You learn why some people seem to glide through life as if doors open for them, while others keep pushing the same locked door with the same bruised shoulder. It isn't luck. It isn't worthiness. It's interface. The old paradigm teaches force. The new paradigm teaches coherence. So the question isn't whether the old reality is dissolving. It is. The question is whether you participate consciously, becoming a pioneer who helps stabilize the new template, or whether you resist until the shift happens anyway, and you arrive later, exhausted, wondering why you fought the very thing you asked for. Your future self is already living in coherence with infinite possibilities. That's not a poetic line. It's a real invitation to let your present self catch up by stopping the habits that kept you split and by choosing today in small, honest ways to live from unified attention. Make the declaration, join the frequency, and let the waiting end where it always ends, inside your own choice to become coherent.